Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We heard that the plenary session was finalized, delayed, so we waited a couple of minutes, but now we would like to start. And it's a pleasure to have you all here. I would like to warmly welcome to our side event from Panorama with the title Connecting for Impact, Promoting Local Success Stories to Inform Global Policy Targets. My name is Rosemary Metz. I am from the German International Cooperation GIZ, and I am currently also working as one of two partnership coordinators of Panorama, and it's a pleasure for me to guide you today through this event. So what awaits you in these next 1.5 hours? You will get, after the welcoming words, you will get a first introduction in Panorama. Then we will have the chance to dive deeper into two thematic areas of Panorama, which are most closely related to the Global Landscape Forum main topics, which is ecosystem-based adaptation and biodiversity and agriculture. And in both interventions, you will also hear real-life examples of solutions which will be presented by solution providers from Uganda and from Madagascar. And in the second part of the event, we would like to break out into group sessions in order to allow a much more interactive discussion with all of you. I will announce later what the two different groups contain. And after that, we come together again here in plenary to share the results from the groups and to close the event. So first of all, it's a great pleasure to announce and to invite Mr. Christian Grossheim from our German Environment Ministry to the floor. Mr. Grossheim is coming from the Department of Nature Conservation of the Environment Ministry, and the Environment Ministry is our main development and partner and supporter of Panorama since the beginning. Mr. Grossheim, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. It's very good to see that even though we are on the final lap of the Global Landscapes Forum, there are still so many committed people here in the room. The Panorama platforms or knowledge hub from the BMU perspective is really a success story. Because we started with an EKI project on blue solutions with marine and coastal ecosystem protection, and now we have a whole network of experience and a lot of information gathered on very different topics, and it fits perfectly from my perspective to the Global Landscapes Forum. The Global Landscapes Forum this year is about connecting for impact and looking at to overcome or to go from commitment to action. And what Panorama is looking for is solutions for a healthy planet. And it's also about connecting people and giving them the possibility to find solutions which were already found elsewhere in the world, and to support in this regard a learning platform and an exchange platform among actors. So from my perspective, it fits perfectly into what we are discussing here with the Global Landscapes Forum. When I lost it a little bit. I think that we are still in a process of letting this Panorama platform grow We discussed it, that maybe forest could also be a topic in the future. Well, I'm glad that you are here. I hope we have a lively discussion afterwards, and BMU is happy that we had the chance to fund a project which developed in such a prosperous way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grossheim. So let me go straight into the introduction of Panorama in order to give you an overview about this global partnership and initiative. And we start directly with a short introduction video so that you can get a first insight.
What if we could learn from each other's success, rather than reinventing the wheel again and again?
I find it very exciting that there's a trend of trying to find solutions and trying to sort of understand how these solutions have happened and how they can be replicable.
Panorama is a strong and growing partnership for learning and exchanging knowledge across geographic, sectoral and thematic boundaries. Practitioners working in nature conservation and development share successful approaches, projects and methods, or solutions. By breaking a solution down into its key components, or building blocks, Panorama contributors make their lessons learned accessible to others. Building blocks can be adapted, recompiled, and reapplied by someone else. A solution seeker with a specific challenge, building on what's worked before. Solutions are used as real-life examples in trainings, and workshops and webinars bring people together to discuss, network, and learn. An online platform makes the solutions accessible to a global community. Take Nia, for example. She works for a small NGO, running a project to better involve communities in water management. Documenting her experience as a Panorama solution allows Nia to reflect and better understand what worked and why. The exposure on Panorama gives visibility and recognition to her fantastic work beyond the local context in which it was applied.
We need to ignore national boundaries and make sure that knowledge of what works and why it works is shared everywhere around the world.
Naomi Bolin, he's an advisor to the Minister of Environment in his country. For him, the Panorama is a useful source of information because it allows him to better understand trends in conservation and development. The solutions provide him with real-life examples to underpin policy recommendations.
We talk about the problems, we complain about the challenges, but there are solutions around the world, and we need to share those solutions a lot more proactively so that we can start to talk positively in conservation.
Sharing my solution here as one of the best things that I do.
Only if we learn from each other's success can we achieve better decision-making and greater impact for conservation and development. Let's focus on what works. Contribute now.
So, learning from what works, that's the overall motto and guiding principle of Panorama. And in order to put this into practice, Panorama applies a universal learning methodology which combines online and analog formats with each other, peer-to-peer learning formats, and is using this unique modular case study format of which you have heard in the video already. So the backbone of Panorama, if you look at the right side of the slide, is a quite sophisticated web platform, which is a solution database where the users can apply a wide range of search options and filters to explore solutions across different thematic areas, countries and regions. But also face-to-face meetings are very crucial, especially in order to bring solution provider and potential replicators together. We are also working more and more with contexts and awards in order to identify large numbers of solutions around different priority themes, and we are working with different communication activities and products to promote solutions further. You have heard about this special solutioning method. This is basically a case study format which breaks down the essential components of a solution into building blocks so that people can see which were the main elements for success. All solutions on Panorama are documented in this same standardized format, and currently we have, as you can see, nearly 500 solutions on the platform, contributed by over 400 solution providers from 70 countries, so it's really a global network. You have also heard Panorama solutions are defined in a very broad and very inclusive art. So basically anything like tools, methods, products, policies also can be a solution if they comply with these three very important criteria. So they have to have already had an impact. So that's why we want to show and learn from what has worked. So it's not to share ideas or concept, but really things that have been applied and have created impact. And solutions need to be replicable or scalable so that they can be applied in other geographies, in other social and sectoral contexts. And we have this scope, the scope of Panorama is conservation and sustainable development. Who is Panorama? Here you can see the seven, excuse me, I have to get used to the number because the latest partner, UNDP, has just joined last week during the CBD COP in Egypt. These are the 7 Panorama partners who are coordinating and developing the partnership. We share the secretariat and partnership coordination function between GIZ and IUCN. And these are our 2 important development partners. The very beginning of Panorama was taking place in a GEF-funded project, and by now the BMU is our main development partner of Panorama. Panorama is structured in themes, mainly for organizational reasons, because each theme is managed and coordinated by one or several partner organizations. And you can see here who is coordinating which theme. We have currently 5 themes. Business engagement was also launched just last week at the CBD COP. And the sustainable urban development theme will be launched early next year. And by then we will get also the World Bank as new partner to the partnership. But additionally, we have, of course, a very wide range of contributors, a vast network of solution providers, and these are actually the key actors of Panorama, because these are the persons and institutions who develop and contribute solutions to this network. And they are coming from very different types of organizations. They are coming from NGOs, they are coming from government, from academia, from local communities, or from the private sector. Here you can see just few of them. And so Panorama is really an open and very inclusive platform, and basically anyone is invited to contribute. So a look to the way ahead, what are our priority development areas. As I mentioned, Panorama would like to grow thematically as well as institutionally. We are welcoming new partners, we are welcoming new themes on Panorama, and there is interest from projects, from institutions, from initiatives to make use of Panorama as an already existing partnership and knowledge management base in order to meet their knowledge management needs. There are also further themes in discussion. I mentioned already the sustainable urban development. Mountain ecosystems is another theme in discussion. And we are also discussing about a theme on forests and FLR, which could be very interesting also for the Global Landscape Forum partners, and which could be a possibility to link up between the two initiatives. Thus, our intention is also later to further discuss on cooperation possibilities, but we are also working on our business model, for example, with the intention to get from a very much project-based funding to a more diverse set of funding mechanisms. And we are trying and working on strengthening the link to global policy targets by showcasing actually how specific solutions can contribute to the achievement of these targets. So that was for now for the introduction. I would like to move over now to the next agenda item, which is addressing the synergies between ecosystem-based adaptation and forest landscape restoration. And here you will also hear about a very interesting Panorama solution about the forest landscape restoration approach of Madagascar. So let me invite the two next speakers to the floor. Matthias Bertram, my colleague from GIZ. He is advisor in the ICI-funded global project Mainstreaming Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, and he is also the coordinator of this theme on the Panorama partnership and platform. And Julien Noël, who is the member of the technical support unit of the Ministry of the Environment, Ecology and Forests of Madagascar. He has several national focal point functions for FLR, for AFR 100, but also for mangroves. And thus he is also responsible for the development and implementation of the FLR national strategy. Matthias and Julien Noël, the floor is yours.
Yes, and good afternoon also from my side, and thank you very much, Rosemary, for this very nice introduction. My name is Matthias Bertram. I'm working for GIZ on ecosystem-based adaptation. Just out of curiosity, who of you is working on ecosystem-based adaptation? 2, 3, 4, 5 persons. Who of you is working on forest landscape restoration? A bit more, okay. Yeah, and these are just exciting times because I also learned about the synergies of these two concepts. And in fact, this is a very exciting time of the year because the CBD COP just concluded, also with a decision on biodiversity, on climate change, adopting voluntary guidelines on ecosystem-based adaptation and disaster risk reduction and the restoration of ecosystems are very important elements of these concepts. Now we are here at Global Landscapes Forum, so the attention is to look in sustainable landscapes, and next week is the climate change COP, so we are discussing about our efforts in climate change mitigation and adaptation. So, and these topics, EBA, they address, in fact, all of these conventions. And just to give you, to introduce to you into the similarities of the two concepts, just to provide you with the definitions. And they are, in fact, very similar, and this is good to see. The FLR definition deals with the rehabilitation of degraded terrestrial ecosystems into tree-rich landscapes and forests. It's about sustainable agriculture. It's about mixed agroforestry systems, rehabilitation of grasslands and marsh areas, and it enhances the resilience of entire landscapes and improves the people's well-being, so it's also about people. This is one definition from a GIZ position paper, but I think it was coined by IUCN, by our IUCN colleagues in WWF a few years back. And EBA, in fact, was coined 10 years ago at the CBD COP as well, and it's about using biodiversity and ecosystem services as part of an overall adaptation strategy to help people to adapt to climate change. And how? It uses sustainable management, it uses conservation, but also restoration of ecosystems. So, and just for you to highlight the color code to see the similarities, it's about rehabilitation, it's about restoration, making use of ecosystems, helping people, it's about resilience. So we can see those two definitions go hand in hand. And sometimes we are thinking about silos, but here we can also think about building bridges between different concepts. And this is quite inspiring, I think, for all of us. And just to highlight 3 points, what are the similarities, what are the differences? Well, the similarities are clearly both concepts. They focus on landscape, ecosystem-based approaches. It's very important to work with local communities. It's about participation. And those two concepts, they provide multiple benefits to societies and people, may it be soil protection, clean water, food and fiber, and also climate regulation. This is what the two concepts have in common. Of course, there are some differences. FLR is clearly focusing on terrestrial ecosystems, landscapes with trees. It does not necessarily include current and future climate risks, but it can. And the difference for EBA is clearly there's a broader scope, there is conservation, there's sustainable management, there's restoration of ecosystems. Clearly climate change, current climate impacts and future climate impacts are addressed. And finally, the focus of ecosystems is broader. It goes from mountains to the oceans, so not only terrestrial but also marine ecosystems. And on some of the tables, I hope of all, you will find some publications on inspiring cases, ecosystem-based adaptation from mountains to oceans. And many examples, they deal with restoration of forests as well as landscapes, so they would also apply for forest landscape restoration. So the two concepts are very, very similar. And just looking into the next week's climate change COP, what IIED did was an analysis of the nationally determined contribution of the countries, so the heart of the Paris Agreement, which we need to fulfill. And 15% or 24 of those NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, they explicitly refer to EBA. This includes countries like Mexico, but also Madagascar is one very nice example. And 66% or 108 NDCs, they refer to ecosystem-oriented measures in the adaptation part of the NDCs. And if we look into the top 5 measures, what countries want to do under adaptation, the number 1 is restoration and conservation of ecosystems, in particular forests at watershed level and coastal areas. So this is the same concept for forest landscape restoration. Forest landscape restoration is one tool, one element, one building block of an NDC NDC commitment in the country. Agroforestry is very important, and then you will also find under adaptation green infrastructure measures, dikes, dams, water reservoirs, institutional capacity building and research. So just to illustrate that under the NDCs, under the Paris Agreement, restoration of ecosystems is the #1 priority of the adaptation part of countries' NDCs. And I think Madagascar is a very good example for that. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Julien Noël Rakoto. I think I'm misspelling your last name now, but in case of Madagascar, this is very challenging. Rakoto Arisoa, he's the FLR focal point of Madagascar, and he would like to share with you a very inspirational EBA FLR solution from Madagascar with the title From International Commitments to Local Actions. So thank you very much, and Julien, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matthias, and good afternoon, everybody. I prefer to do it in French or in Dutch, but my boss, Matthias, said that I need to do it in English, so I will try to do my best to do so. So as he said, I will present an experience of just to confirm about the Madagascar commitment for FLR. So we know, everyone, that we have 4 million hectares of degraded lands and forestry to restore by 2030. So I just to continue the explanation that Matthias have said about the FLRs. FLR is a solution for ecosystem-based adaptation. Why? Because as he said, there is a lot of synergy between FLR and ecosystem-based adaptation. So I'm giving you just an example by these photos who come from some levels capacity building in a regional level and capacity building in technical level in the very local. And we can see, for example, the result of to scale up some individual activity to a broad activity in terms of restoration using plantation of trees. So we can see that forest landscape restorations aims to restore different functions of our ecosystem, as he said about water resources and soil and also biodiversity. It means wild or domestic biodiversity. What will be the solution faced to our commitment and in the 4 million of hectares to restore? So as Panorama proposed, we have found right now 4 blocks. First one is about to create intersectoral structures which try to coordinate every activity. So within these blocks, we have a lot of sectors which is involved on the landscape, and it means forestry, agriculture, and livestock ministries and other ministries. The second one, it is very linked to this central block. The structure is the capacity building of the actors. So in this way, maybe in the second part, I will present you how is the link between these 2 blocks. But this is very important in the process of FLR, because from the beginning at the end, we always need this capacity building for different categories of actors. It means at the level, national level, regional, at very local level, and also for its categories of actors. The third block for this solution for Madagascar is the development of the national strategy of restorations. So it is the big framework to coordinate every action to reach the commitment about the 4 million of hectares. So we can find on that 4 big orientations, which is very linked to the situation in Madagascar and how to face every problem in terms of governance at different level, technical aspect for scaling up, and also some orientation on the finance mechanisms. The fourth one is about one tools that we have developed recently. It's about prioritizing the landscape, which is for the 4 million of hectares. So as you see, I have tried to put the block one just in the middle because it is the principal blocks who try to make links between the other 3 blocks. So I just try to show you one by one those 4 blocks. First one is, as I said, it's the structures that plays the driving roles of the FLR process. So, sorry, it's in French for the actions, but what is important, as Rosemary said together, is to know what is the impact of these blocks of as it is a solution. So I can share with you, but by using these structures, so there is an aspect that accepting landscape approach with the regard of territory planification. So right now the Ministry of Land Tenure are using landscape approach to make this territory planification. So it's an impact. The second one is to streamline in approaches and coordination of FLR implementation. So it is really some things like FLR is a long-term process, so it needs this kind of coordination. So the structure is very important to not only for the intersectoral approach, but to follow step by step the process. The block 2 is about capacity building. As I said, it is always needed, all the process. So the principal impact of that is that to considering of ecosystem services in the other sectors. So as I said, for example, in those photos, we can find some capacity building for the Ministry of Land Tenure just to help them to use the landscape approach for developing the new territory planifications. The second impact of this block number 2 is considering FLR in land tenure securitization process. So for example, before land tenure process is just thinking about individual or private land. And when you use FLR, there is every time some big area, it's just public domain. So we need to think about what kind of land tenure we need for this kind of categories of land. So by using this capacity building to the land tenure sector, we are trying to work together to think about this new ways of how to make securitization for this type of land. The block number 3 is about the national strategy of restoration. So you know already those problems of soil degradations and water management and forest degradation. So by thinking about that, we are trying to find which are the problem for those degradations. So that's why we need to set up a strategy. So after that, as an impact, we have, for example, developed a national spatial directive. So it gives you which will be the watershed will be prioritized to be restored for the 4 million of our commitment by considering a group of ecosystemical functions. It means about water, about soil, and about biodiversity, as I said. So it's a very technical aspect, spatial aspect, and it gives more ideas for how to coordinate all the projects to work in some area which is considered priority. And second impact about this third block is about the action research of suitable species for restorations. There is already some presentation during this GLF about that. So there we are thinking about some, not only for forest species, for forestry, but also for the other sector, for example, agriculture and others, because we have already fixed our target in terms of ecosystemical functions. So we need to find which species for forestry, for agriculture, which be more used for better to use to target this function. So I think that by using these tools, it will be more easy to help the other actors to participate in FLR activities. The last block is about this multi-criteria analysis for prioritization landscape for restoration. So we can see in this map, in this green color here, this is the watershed, which is our first priority in terms of restorations. So the 4 million hectares is not the totality of this area, but just the very yellow one. So we are trying to focus on 2 or 4 what I said. The yellow is the zone of actions, and the other might be the zone for the impact of the projects. So the impact of this fourth block is to capitalize in the concept of additionality for coordination in project intervention zone. For example, for the GEF financement, one of the big criteria is to have, for example, if there is already some project like BAD or FIDA in some areas, it's better to establish by using this prioritizations to focus all the project there, so we can have more impacts in terms of ecosystem restoration on those areas. So it helps to help the new project to focus their intervention zone to this area. And yes, as I already explained, orienting restoration option with regards to the target ecosystem service. So this map also is very useful to see which will be the right options of restorations by using the target ecosystem service, which is already defined for its colors. It's not the very detailed map, but you can find 3 colors on that. For example, this is for forest, this one is for soil, and this one is for water. So you can already find what kind of activity do you need and which option is better for that. So you see that all those things is very useful in terms of tools to reach our target of restoration. And just to show what is Panorama for us in Madagascar right now. So I've already talked about the problem of degradation, so these actual situations. So we can see all the degradations, soils, and every kind of how to manage the landscape. So by set up this solution, take FLR as a solutions to make better arrangement for the landscape management, so that by this way, Panorama will be for us a way of sharing our experience and also a way to monitor all the activity that we have done, and also to help us for planning the solution. For example, we are begin with 4 blocks. And already by using this approach, we find right now that there will be another 5th block about the finance to make a finance architecture for doing the operational activity. So we are thinking about this 5th block, so that I think that with the 5th one we can reach more easy our target for 4 million by 2030. So just a panorama of landscape where I'm working in 2005 in the southeast of Madagascar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julien Noël and Matthias. That was an inspiring example of a solution, one of currently 102 solutions that you can find on the ecosystem-based adaptation portal of Panorama. So let's move to another thematic area of Panorama, which is agriculture and biodiversity. In this area, you can find practical experiences on how to achieve a balance between socioeconomic and ecological benefits from biodiversity-friendly agriculture practices. And now we will hear another real-life example of a solution from Uganda. And this solution is about how the deforestation challenge in Uganda was tackled through agroforestry skill development. So please let me invite for this next block, the next 3 speakers, which is the solution provider is Mrs. Patience Namara from Uganda. She is country manager of Fair Venture Worldwide in Uganda. but was formerly also working for the National Environment Management Authority and other institutions. And she is a specialist in environmental and natural resource management. Welcome, Mrs. Nawada. A.K. Ann-Kathrin Neureuter. She is working for the NGO RARE, based in Berlin, and she is senior manager of the Farming for Biodiversity initiative. And A.K. is also one of the coordinators of this agriculture and biodiversity thematic area on Panorama. And thirdly, Jörg Lohmann, another colleague from the German International Cooperation, GIZ. He is currently leading a project on biodiversity and ecosystem services in agrarian landscapes, funded by the German Environment Ministry and implemented in India, Kenya, and Tajikistan. And he is also coordinator of this thematic area of Panorama. So the floor is yours.
Thank you for that flattering introduction. So I need to know how this works. Because I have not been able to see most of you or to interact with most of you, I have my CV, my address on the screen, so you can get in touch with us in case you feel you can work with us. My name is Patience, as has been introduced. I'm country manager for Fair Ventures Worldwide in Uganda. Talking about the agroforestry skills development in an effort to tackle deforestation challenge in Uganda. Okay, so just briefly, Fair Ventures Worldwide is a German-born company. I'll call it German-born company with branches in, I thought I was tall enough. With branches in Indonesia, where this has been successful and which we are trying to replicate in Uganda. And this is how the Fair Ventures general concept works. We do not only look at one aspect of the solution. Here for us, we look at a holistic approach to solving these problems we have. And as illustrated in this small animation, we look at issues of land tenure, we look at issues of food, because food security is a big issue when it comes to our societies. Connecting the markets, the producers to the markets and the international markets. So we do not look at only the landscape restoration, but we also look at other aspects of the solution. I've already talked about what Fair Ventures does, and this is what we do in Uganda. Three main aspects, which is promotion of fast-growing indigenous species to rehabilitate the degraded land in mixed species agroforestry systems. Doing digital measuring and monitoring right from the nurseries, from the planting material up to the product level, that, like I just explained in the diagram that I showed before. And of course, development of innovative engineered wood products, that is closing the cycle from the growing to the final product. Just basic facts why we thought this was the approach we should adopt. The current forest cover for Uganda is about only 15% of the total land area, which comes to about 3.6 million hectares. on a sad note, very sad note, we lose about 100,000 hectares every year. That is not something to be proud of. And in the last 10 years only, we've lost over 1 million hectares of forest cover. That's not something that should be happening. And of all that has been lost, it's only 150,000 hectares that has been so far reforested by the government. And that means they alone cannot do enough, so the private sector and the other actors have to account for the rest of the effort. Now, going back to our approach, we are dealing with the youth. We are dealing with the youth and we're dealing with farmers. Now, Uganda has the world's youngest population with about 70 or even over 78% of these people below 30 years. That's worrying because they're still around. And of that 78%, 49% are aged between 0 and 14. So we are talking about a future without forests, because all these people will need food, all these people will need housing, so our forests are really under stress. And that's not even the last of the problems. We have a population growth of rate of about 3.2%, and it keeps growing. And the total dependency ratio is 108%. That is abnormal. The unemployment among the youth only is 2.91%. So how do we come in to handle this? Fair Ventures has had a few interventions with the help from sponsors, including the BMZ, the ministry here in Germany, and with some of the funds that have been given to us by the BMZ, we are empowering students so that they can earn a living from their land and contribute to reforestation, erosion control, and soil fertility preservation. In the photos here, you can see the first photo that is a consignment of over 10,000 seedlings being transported to the schools in Western Uganda. We have 3 schools we are working with, and some of the beehives that have been provided as a solution to, I mean, if you're growing trees, you have to have something on the side that can help you survive in between before you harvest. So these are some of the interventions we are doing. We are supporting the 3 schools I talked about to integrate agroforestry into their curriculum. Ordinarily, agroforestry is not taught in these vocational schools. Other things have been taught, like plumbing, like building, construction, and stuff. And we thought if we introduced agroforestry, taught them about how to raise your own seedlings, how to transplant them, how to manage your nursery, it would help a lot of people to have access to seedlings, which the common person in the villages there would not be able to afford. It's an opportunity cost between food and trees. So if you're able to grow your own trees, you're able to get them at a cheaper price compared to if you're buying from the bigger players. This makes a big difference. And those are some of the seedlings we are raising in some of these nurseries at the schools. We also aim at transforming agricultural landscapes through constructive partnerships with smallholder farmers. This is through a small grant provided by Stihl. It's a German company. And with these funds, we are able to take on small farmer groups and teach them about agroforestry, teach them that you can actually get maximum profit from your small piece of land, growing both trees and agricultural crops. In the first picture, those are beans. It's a bean garden. intercropped with different species of indigenous trees. The next photo with the bananas. That's also another farmer, one of our lead farmers who's actually growing a lot of bananas concurrently with indigenous trees. And then on the lower photo, that is a smallholder farmer who's also, as you can see, Myzopsis emini. That's the tree you can see in the photo. Some coffee and some bananas. So he can harvest and get income from different types of crops at different times of the year. We do not stop at just providing the seedlings and providing the funds. We also provide technical help. As you can see here, we do field monitoring for the test fields and for the farmer gardens. And we also do soil sampling, soil tests, to be able to tell which species do well where and under which conditions, so that for every planting that is made, you're sure that this tree or this species or crops will do well in this particular environment. We take time to visit our smallholder farmers and get to know them and get to know what they do. And in the first photo here, this farmer is growing cocoa together with bananas. So in the long run, he'll be able to harvest from both crops. And in between, can even have smaller crops, such as beans, maize, and other short-term crops. Some of them, like, like the one in the upper photo, that is our lead farmer, who we are not only convincing them to grow trees, but we are also convincing those who already have natural forests on their lands to maintain them. And that is one of our farmers who has not only kept the forest, but is earning from it, because it's a tourist site, and now people can come there to view chimpanzees, to walk, to have forest walks, to have picnics. So he's earning from keeping the forest. And on the other side, he's also growing trees on another side. We also meet them and talk to them, find out their challenges. As you can see in the next photo, we talk to them to make sure that whatever solutions we are giving them are in sync with what they need. So we do not just impose on them, we work with them. And just to emphasize why we work with the younger populations, the schools, and just like David Suzuki said, unless we are willing to encourage our children to reconnect with and appreciate the natural world, we can't expect them to help and protect it. So for us, we think dealing with the school kids as young as that, and also the other ones that we deal in the higher school, in the higher levels, will help us to achieve this, because they do not only learn about it here, but they also go and teach their parents who probably did not go to school, who have no idea about all these issues, and we help the continuation of this process. And hoping that eventually we shall all be smiling like this tree. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks so much, Patience, for a really nice presentation, bringing Uganda here to us in Bonn. You mentioned several times in your introductory remarks when we were talking about the challenges in Uganda that the deforestation rate is nothing to be proud of, but I think you have shown that you have found a solution to be proud of. So we're really thankful for that. And I'm also really happy that we have two very different FLR
solutions, forest landscape restoration solutions with us today from different perspectives, showing that the solutions need to be very context specific in order to tackle problems, and that's really the beauty of Panorama. So what I want to do very quickly is speak to you from the perspective of a portal host at Panorama, as we heard that there might be several potentially among you who might be interested in joining the platform or learning more about it. So I want to dive quickly into the why, what, and how of Panorama. And yeah, starting with the why. So why would an organization such as RARE, GIZ, or iFoam Organics, in the case of the Agriculture and Biodiversity Portal, invest time and resources into such a collaboration? Because it is very intensive in both regards. Well, from our perspective, two needs came together last year, and I just want to share this as a little story with you, but of course it's different in all cases. But in the case of the Agriculture and Biodiversity Portal, we from RARE and iFoam Organics International had been running a crowdsourcing contest to collect the brightest ideas that are already connecting agriculture and biodiversity. And as part of that contest, we also had some funding to further scale the solutions, but only the 9 best ones in 9 countries. Well, we were set out to hunt for 100 proven solutions. In the end, we got 338, which was a bit of a luxury challenge because we could not go into depth with all of these solutions. So our problem was that we had this vast area of knowledge, and we couldn't share it with others. Then I met Jörg from GIZ also last year, who had a very different problem, who was just starting out with a project and looking for proven solutions. And he was just in the very early phase. So with Panorama, we teamed up and we created that platform to share solutions. Of course, the Agriculture and Biodiversity Portal is not only for Jörg and I. It has been very successful, as we see by the numbers. The solutions on the portal have been viewed over 47,000 times to date, with individual very popular solutions attracting thousands of people looking at them. Which brings me to the what. So when we started out with our portal, it was very important for us that we put a specific focus on agriculture and biodiversity, with the emphasis on the end. Because biodiversity has been the very basis from which our agricultural systems evolved over the past 10,000 or so years. But the way that modern agricultural production and consumption works today sadly contributes to the loss of biodiversity. And so from time to time, we receive solutions that focus on either agriculture or biodiversity, but we are not considering those for the portal. Which brings me to my next point, the how we running this structure. For us as portal hosts, ensuring quality is key. We have a group of 20 or so reviewers, all experts in sustainability and agriculture, that we manage behind the scenes, and we can tap into their knowledge for review support. And it's also important to realize that the portal itself is only the knowledge base, but there's a lot going on around it, like Rosemary mentioned earlier. So we have solution fairs, we have hands-on training, we have scaling workshops to bring solution providers and seekers together. So I think I'm right on time. Thank you for your 3 minutes of attention, and we're happy to answer further questions later on.
Thanks to AK and Patience for setting the scene. Hello, everybody. Agriculture and biodiversity. A hot topic indeed, as farmers, it was mentioned already, are accused as being the drivers of loss of biodiversity. And very often that is the case. Up to 70% of loss of biodiversity is accrued to intensive agricultural activities. But farmers at the same time are also partners for working for biodiversity conservation and also ecosystem services. And this is what is the big benefit of such a portal and all the solutions which were presented here for us, working also in a project financed by the Environmental Ministry on biodiversity and ecosystem service in agrarian landscapes. Agrarian landscapes are covering all our countries. They're very important for food security, for livelihoods, for income generation, for employment, for people. So Panorama helps me as a project manager also to get a voice in the agricultural community on one hand, but also to give our farmers a picture, a face, hinter a story, and that is the triggering issue of Panorama, to get a personalized story behind an activity which is supporting biodiversity and ecosystem services. So Panorama, why Panorama? It brings together stakeholders, implementing agencies, organizations, and donors, as it was mentioned also by Mr. Großheim earlier. It cross-cuts silos. Though we have this structure still, we are thinking of, and we are actually connecting and sending and interlinking our solutions in different portals so far. It also adds value. It adds value to our projects. It adds value to your project and your initiative and your program. And therefore, I would like to invite you to join us on the following discussion group. Where are the synergies? Where are the benefits between Panorama on one hand and Global Landscapes Forum on the other hand? Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much to Patience, Ann-Kathrin and Jörg to give us this insight into the agriculture and biodiversity theme. And as Jörg just mentioned, now the time has come where we would like to invite you to break up in 2 group sessions, because we would like to use the next 30 minutes to get really much more interactively in discussion with all of you. We invite you on one hand side to one group where, also you mentioned it, we would like to discuss with you how Panorama can be useful in the context of the Global Landscape Forum, which concrete cooperation options we can find there. This group will meet outside of this room. If you cross the hall in a diagonal way to the right corner, there we set up a space for this discussion group. The second group will stay here in the room. It's a coffee table discussion on integration and restoration of restoration and climate change objectives. And in that session, you will also have the possibility to live explore the Panorama solution platform by yourself with your own devices and to discuss on this topic. As I mentioned, the second group stays here, and please think about in which group you would like to go and to join the discussion. We will meet here again in this room in 30 minutes. We are a bit over time, but we started later, and I do hope that you are willing to spend some more minutes with us, because after the group session we will share the conclusions of the discussions and close the event back here in the room. So thank you very much, and please decide which group to join. As I mentioned, group 1 outside, second group here. Thank you.
Hello? So those of you who would like to join the online demonstration, if you want to stay in the room, we would invite you to come forward. Unfortunately, we could not find a coffee table where we can sit in a round, but please come forward and join us here in the front to witness the online demo. In fact, the next 30 minutes will consist of 3 different parts. The first one is to have a short introduction into the online demo, looking into the example from Madagascar. Then we want you to learn how to use Panorama, 10 minutes of online exploration, and then we want to learn from you how we could improve the Panorama database, what is missing, what you need, these kind of things, and then we will summarize everything in a short discussion round. So please come forward. Now I would like to invite Julian again to the stage. Sorry, there's still much more work to do. No, just kidding. Julian, he will introduce the online version of the presented EBA FLR solution to us. And in the back, we have Anna Rota from GIZ, and she will assist in the online navigation. And this is a premiere for us because we have never done this at such a distance, but I think we will manage in this room. So, Julian, the floor is yours, and I hope this microphone will also work.
Thank you, Matthias. So, as Matthias said, I will try just to share it out. I have already explained what is the content of our blogs in Panorama format, but now we are trying directly to use this website to have some interactions of that. So I will just to give you some example how to use this website. So you can scroll up. So it is about the FLR in Madagascar. So you can just find in the first step of this matrix the summary of the problem. It means about the problematics in which we are faced for the situation. So it's a very summary to see which kind of problem we have, and so that we can go to the solution after. So we can some classification of the problem, the ecosystem, the theme, and the hazard. And also it is very important to see this kind of information in terms of sustainable development goals. So when you are used to present, for example, a concept note for a financing documents, we need to fix which goals are aims for these actions, and also about some HE target. It's very useful to say that your project is very important or not. So after that, you can find the location is the map of Madagascar, and after that we can have some information about the challenge that we are facing for. So we are talking about the governance, about every kind of challenge for Madagascar in terms of resource management. And also we can see which are the beneficiaries of the actions. So we can find the sectors and different members and other subnational extension services, and also civil society and I want to precise local communities, very important of these actions. So as I've already explained, we have 4 blocks for Madagascar for this Panorama format. So the first one is about the structures, the intersectoral structures, which is the rule of coordination. Second one is about the capacity building, as we say that it is very useful along the process. And third one is about the strategy of FLR. And the fourth is about the DS, and it's the spatial multi-criteria. So when you scroll on that, you can just click on this block after. But before that, I want to explain again this how those blocks interact between them. So the first one is the intersectoral structures, and by using the national strategy, and after doing the strategy, it is said that how to make, for example, the technical aspect in terms of to scaling up. We have developed the third block about the spatial multi-criteria analysis, And as you say, so by the way we have always put in the capacity building along the process in terms of multi-sectoral actions, in terms of developing framework, in terms of doing such special tools, so it's always very needed. So you can see that this 4 blocks is very linked to reach the goal that we are fixing. That is the first how to say that this block is useful, and there is a very strong links between these 2 blocks. And after that, we can see the impact of the project, the solutions. So, for example, I can just to give you some example of to be the synergy with other policies. For example, for renewable energy, full woods, and also for the reforestation. So, in these actions, by using the intersectorial process, for example, it's very easy to put together different sectors to think about to harmonize the sector policy to reach the same goal of ecosystemical functions. So after that, in these first pages, we can have just some story about Afala in Madagascar. So it is just some things like to say how FLR is very important for us to face the ecosystem degradation. So maybe tonight, when you have time, you can read the story. After that, there is some pictures just to show you in which way we have done those activities. For example, after the training for the land tenure sector, we have given some diplomas, certificates, and also the maps of the special criteria and other activities. So it is just to show you how we have done this, give some pictures to give some ideas about that. And yes, next. So here's our colleague working in GIZ, working closely with me to develop the information and set up this format. And also you can see some contributor of that and the address, and also some resource that we are using to set up. So there is some document that you can download on that, so you can find other information that it's very useful to understand the solution that we are presenting on this for Panorama format. Yes. So I will just try to pick one block to see what is the structure within the block. So for example, we'll try to take the first one, this intersectoral. So you just click on that and you will see that there is some summary about this, what is within this structure, what is the component of that. For example, there is some working group within these structures, forest management group, water, agriculture and financing, and soil management. So you can understand how this block is composed. And after that, if you scroll down, so you can see also what are the enabling factors. It is very important, for example, to have that. One of these enabling factors is to have this strong synchronization of different concepts, policy, coherence, duty, interaction between the focal point, which is within the structures, and also with the other sectors. And also we can directly find some important things in terms of lessons learned on this, using about these blocks. So just to give you an example, FLR is a multi-sectoral landscape concepted. So it's integrating various stakeholders, and from the beginning until now. And it is very important in terms of landscape approach to have several actors, several sectors to be involved, because landscape include a lot of type of mosaic. So there is a lot of lesson on that, but as I said, I just show you what is the content so that you can play with it tonight. And there's some gallery of photos also. And that is say that FLR is part of the ecosystem-based adaptation solution, as I've already explained. So if you take one by one this the other blocks, you will see this kind of content in terms of which information can you find there, and how can you imagine, and also to use those this information to scale up not only at the national level in Madagascar, but everywhere when there is a similarity in terms of condition where you are working. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Julian, for explaining the online version of your solution from Madagascar. And in fact, all solutions, they follow the same pattern, they have the same structure. You can dive deep into them layer by layer, from the summary to the classifications, to each building block, and even to web links, to videos, and further publications like the FLR strategy of Madagascar, for instance. And now it's time for you to explore and to learn from our Panorama database, the platform. And we would like you to put your devices on the table, like your computer, if you have one, your smartphone, your tablet, whatever you prefer, and to use, to go to that website, to go to www.panorama.solutions, and then you can also go to the Explorer. We would like to let you to explore the database by looking for two filter sets. Under themes, you will find one filter set which is called ecosystem conservation, and this also includes ecosystem restoration. And you find a filter set under themes which is called climate change. And just filter the solutions according to this filter set, and probably 200 solutions will pop up. So you can choose out of those 200 solutions, you can pick one or two and just explore for 10 minutes of your time. How do they address climate change, and how do they address ecosystem restoration? You can pick from a specific region, you can pick from Africa if you like, from Asia, you can pick a specific ecosystem. And then after those 10 minutes, or during the 10 minutes, you can already try to summarize your learning findings. And for those learning findings, you find some cards on your table, on your desk. And it would be great if you could write down some aha moments, some key findings on the green card. What was special about this? What was special about this solution? What did you learn about it? But you can also be critical. You can use the red card for telling us what are needs. What did you miss? What were you looking for, but you couldn't find it? So for that purpose, we would have the red card. So I will stop now talking to you. You have 10 minutes of your time. You can go to the website. You can browse for one or two solutions and just explore it. And if you have any technical difficulties, we will walk around. We will help you to go to the system. So the 10 minutes are yours now. Thank you.
I hope that we all had good discussions in the two groups. We are coming close to the end of this event, but we would like to share the results of each of these two groups before closing. So did you decide who would give a short summary of the discussion and results of your group?
Yeah, I think I can try it because ultimately we ran out of time, and this is what I have to admit. Well, we had 3 segments in our 30 minutes. We had one online presentation. Julien, he was presenting together with Anna the Madagascar solution as an online demo, so people became aware of how the solutions and the building blocks are structured, what kind of information you find online. And then we moved into an exploration phase where all of you had 10 minutes to dive into the database and to look for solutions which are addressing restoration and climate change targets. And you picked a lot of interesting solutions in that time. There was one solution from Egypt, there was Kenya, and many others, and you came up with your findings, actually. What did you find? What did you explore in the database? But also clear future needs. What is important for us as members of Panorama? What kind of information you were looking for, but you couldn't find in the solutions that you browsed? And I think one feedback was a positive one. It's about learning about new approaches, new technologies, no policy impacts. That you can also, and this refers to the EBA theme, you can browse for hazards like drought, temperature increase. You can filter also according to hazards. There was one learning experience on agroforestry, adding trees on farmlands, reduces pressure on natural forest and helps to sequester carbon, so very practical element of carbon storage you can find there. And also it's a way to briefly explain the issues and challenges in a very clear, concise way, and also to source to a solution and the summary. So the summary is like the entry door, and then you can go deeper into the solution to explain more. There was one example from Burundi. I think this is also outside at the poster stand and part of those publications, that local actors are increasingly aware of links between climate disaster prevention and consider these into planning. So to have the synergies between those different concepts or pressures, and the building blocks, they are facilitating like a process. So like in case of Madagascar, coming from forming partnership structures, building capacities, creating a forest landscape restoration strategy. So the building blocks can also describe that, the chain of success elements, the process. Yeah, on the need-based, there was the challenge to use the hazard filter. I think this is also a very complex one. Map-based visualization of the projects is missing. Well, in fact, it is there, but probably there was no time to explore the mapping function. So you can also browse via a map function to see solutions which are close to your working area. Local food system, there were some elements, or I think you explored 3 solutions, and there was no hint on the local food system, how people use and consume food, and also there was no focus on social, cultural aspects, so maybe the drivers behind the challenge. And yeah, lack of data was also mentioned, that the solutions did not, maybe you can explain briefly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I understand. Thank you for this clarification. Yeah, and I think this is pretty much the summary. So I'm not sure if you have any other comments from the group, things that I did not explain. Yes? you. So two aspects, linking with other platforms and the benefit making clear the benefits of it. Okay, thank you. Yes, so I think this was the summary of our group, and I would like to hand over to you now, Rosemary.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Yes, thank you. Maybe on this last aspect, I could add that we are trying to link up with other platforms which have similar objectives. We are, for example, we are linked with BestNet, with Opala platform. So we see this as a challenge, and we are working on interlinking platforms so that people who search on one platform also get the information from others. So that's sometimes a bit of a challenge because the formats of documenting experiences are always different in different platforms, but we are working on that. So let me ask Miriam to briefly present the results of the second group, which was discussing about concrete synergy and cooperation options between Panorama and the Global Landscape Forum.
Well, I'm not very clear-minded anymore, so you'll have to add where I'm missing out from the rest of all of you. But we looked at a couple of topics on synergies between GLF and Panorama, and we focused mainly, I think, most of our discussions on the content and on promotion and communication, and many of them sit in between those. But we felt very much that it was a similar audience, and we were all seekers of solutions, both here at GLF and in Panorama. Same funders as well, there was therefore also no perceived competition between the two, between GLF and what it aims to do, and between Panorama, but in fact that they do quite the opposite, which is enriching each other and have lots to give to both sides. Populate the lab or the Panorama with experiences that get mentioned at GLF. I think that's one of the ones that was mentioned, and GLF to bring further solutions on board to the Panorama. The GLF at the same time needs partners to disseminate what they're doing. I can't remember what was meant by this one. Do you remember what this one was? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, I think around the promotion and the communication, we felt that these two things could be brought together under GLF, for example, through things like having a contest to source solutions. We could present solutions in landscape talks, and we could also bring some of these landscape talks back into Panorama and into solutioning those approaches. We discussed webinars and partnering with GLF in and of itself will obviously also increase the outreach of the Panorama platform, so more people are aware of it and they can go on there and find solutions. Since GLF does tend to be perhaps sometimes quite limited, there are a lot of solutions up on Panorama that you cannot address in the few days that we have GLFs every year. So I think that was one of it. We struggled a little bit with the link to policy processes and global targets. Certainly on GLF, we do discuss these in the individual events, but we don't really have a synergy between there. On the Panorama, they do the same, the IG targets and on carbon, but maybe that's something still to be looked at. Tools could be added to Panorama perhaps to do this better, and even at GLF level, those are some things still to think about, how we can do that better, so we can report back, or countries are supported in their reporting back. I think that was it. Anything to add? Did we have it all? Yeah.
It seems that you covered all perfectly. Thank you, Miriam. So with this, we are coming very close to the end of this event. And before I hand over for some closing words to Jörg Lohmann, I would like to thank to all of you for your interest in Panorama. I would like to thank to BMU for opening this event and stay with us during the whole event. And thank you to all presenters and speakers of the event and all the people who have helped to prepare it, to organize this event, and also to the technicians, because we didn't have any technical problem, which is also very good. So thank you from my side to all of you. And then I would like to hand over to you, Jörg, for some closing words.
Thanks a lot, Rosemarie. Thanks a lot to all of you spending that long time on Sunday evening with us, giving us ideas, insights, which we will follow up from the group discussions, looking into solutions in one of these discussion groups and coffee tables at least, creating some appetite, awakening some appetite on your side, maybe to become solution providers or partners, always putting people and their livelihoods in the context of economical, social, and environmental or ecological stability, and or let's call it harmony with nature, to make Panorama a success story. Thanks a lot to all of you and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.